Hey yarn friends, it's me, LlamaMamaKayla. So today I was watching YouTube videos and I was watching Jane at Scraptastic Yarn, and she did a loom knit tip video and she tagged me to do a loom knit tip video. So I thought about it all afternoon to come up with some tips because she gave great tips. So I needed to come up with something different from her tips, I felt like. So I will link her video below so you can go check out her tips. And I'm going to try not to repeat her tips. Some might overlap a little bit, but, you know. So anyway, I just wrote them down in no particular order. Matter of fact, I should have reordered them to make them flow a little better, but it is what it is. Okay, so my number one tip would be washi tape to mark pegs. Jane mentioned a lot of other things, such as fingernail polish and things like that. So I'm going to mention washi tape. This is something you can peel off, and if you need to write, you can easily take a little a Sharpie and just write what you need to do on here. Like you could write purl, so you remember to, excuse me, so that you remember to purl each of those or something like that. You know, whatever it is you're marking. So washi tape works great for that, and you know, you don't have to mark up your looms. I do mark on my looms. You can take a fingernail polish remover to remove that if you want to. Another thing, and this wasn't one of my other tips, but I'll just go ahead and mention that. See right here, I have this line. I mark all of my looms with this clear, not clear, but clear cut understanding line right here, so that I know the center of the loom with just looking. Because if I want to make something with the half the loom, I could just look at a glance and I know where the center is. So I do mark all my looms like that. Here is another loom I have marked with washi tape. This is side 1. And I was working in the, not in the round, but I was working for a flat panel and coming up this side. And this was my side 2. And I did mark each one of these sides, purl 3. And so, actually the pattern that I was doing, each row did not purl 3 at the front, but I went ahead and marked it purl 3 so that I would check myself to make sure I was doing the right thing. I was doing a 4-row repeat, and only 2 of the rows were purl 3. So it would just check myself. And also by numbering my sides, like this is number 1 and this side is number 2. Also on my pattern, all the E-wrap rows started on side 2. So that helped me keep up with what row I was on. I knew if I was over here that I had an E-wrap. And if I was over here, it was starting with a purl. So that's something that, you know, you can just mark little things to remind you and write on them with a Sharpie, you know. So, so my number 1 tip would be use washi tape. And you can, you know, get washi tape in lots and lots of colors. And my number 2 tip would be stitch markers in this way. And this is my little stitch markers that look like, that look like the little safety pins. I don't know if you can see that too well. It's this kind of stitch markers that I use a lot. Those are easier for me to slip on and off. But if you're doing a repeat of rows, and you're going to need to know, like this particular project, I'm doing a 4-row repeat, and so I put a stitch marker every 4th row. So if I lay my loom knit project down and come back to it, you know, several hours later, I can tell that, okay, I have finished the 4th row right here. So now I can start row 1 again, and 1, 2, 3, and then put a stitch marker. And then I move these up as I'm going, you know, as this comes down, I move these stitch markers up. But that just helps me to remember, you know, like, okay, that was the 4th row, that was the 4th row. So it just helps me if I walk away and then come back. This is a tip. Do not use paper clips for this. They will snag your yarn all up. And it's not fun. So don't use paper clips. But these stitch markers are great for this. Also, number 3, index cards. I write my project that I'm working on, anything special I need to know about that project, what the pattern is I'm using, and such things like that. Or if I need to keep up, excuse me, if I need to, excuse me, if I need to keep up with the number of rows that I'm doing, I just get a index card, either a small or a large one, and write that down, and then I can just throw my index card in with my project in my bag or something. So that's a good tip to keep up with what you're doing. And here, number 4. Okay, a lot of the looms come with these little hooks right here, and it's a skinny handle. And this one happens to be rubber, but most of them are slick plastic, and sometimes they're hard to hold on to if you have any hand issues. I know, you know, as we get older, we get arthritis and things like that. The rubber does allow me to grip a little bit better since I ain't got much to grip with. But what I found even better was making my handles bigger, and these are with those loom bands, those little bitty tiny rubber bands. There is a link, there is a YouTube video that shows how to make these, and so Elijah had done me a bunch of them up, and this in here is just the slick plastic hook that's this size. Now this was a lot better for me because as you can see, I can grip it, and it kind of gives a little rubbery feel, and I can just hold it better. Now, I drop my loom all day long, every few minutes. Not loom, but my pick or hook. I drop it and drop it and drop it. Even with this, I drop it, but less than if it was just a little skinny plastic one. That I dropped like every few seconds. This, I can hold on to it a little bit better. So I went to this next, and that worked great. And then when I was out of town, I went to a Joann's. I found the big KV one, and at first I thought, that's awful big. But I adjusted to it right away, and I just can't even use anything that little anymore. So Joann sells these, and I know you can order them online. And I don't know if any other stores do, because my Michaels and Hobby Lobby do not carry these in the store. But anyway, and they're not that expensive either, maybe $4 to $5 at the most. So that's a great, if you're having arthritis or anything like that, you might want to go with a bigger handle. Jane, that might work for you if you don't have a big handle hook. Let's see, number 5. Okay. This is a large gauge loom. So for my number 5, I said, know your gauge, your yarn, and your stitch. Now this is a large gauge loom. Now most people think you can only use bulky yarn on this loom, but that's not true. You can use a number 4 on this loom, but you got to know what stitch to use. You need to use the U-stitch, U-knit, and that's where you half wrap the peg and stitch over, and that will give you a tight woven fabric. If you use the E-wrap, it's going to have holes in it, and it's not going to look good. Especially if you're, making a little stuffed toy or something, and you put stuffing in it, it's not going to look good because your stuffing is all going to show. And speaking of stuffing, when you do make a project, don't overstuff it. If you can see stuffing, take it out and put about half of that back in. And when you're putting your stuffing in, just stretch it out, fluff it up, and put it in there in layers, not like balls of it. Put it in layers. And I have some right here. I could just show you that. And that wasn't even one of my tips that I had wrote down. But say if you're stuffing a little toy or something, get about this much and just, you know, let that air get up in there, stretch it out, and put that down in your project. And then get some more, stretch that out, and then put that on top of this, and just build your layers. If you put like, you know, tight balls in there, it's going to be lumpy, and you're not going to be as happy with your outcome. So back to the loom, just know your gauge and your yarn and your stitches. What stitches work best for what size yarn on what size looms. And that takes research. You have to, you know, read to find that out. Okay, number 7. Here's another way I mark looms is the little rubber bands. And Elijah made these stitch markers. And he did make several sets to put on Etsy. I just think we haven't uploaded them yet. But this particular loom, this, you know, isn't rib marking or anything. This is, I keep this loom marked this way because when I take hats off the Addie King, I need to know which pegs to put double stitches on, because the Addie King is 46 pegs and this is 41. So certain pegs I need to put 2 stitches. So I just keep this loom marked like that. So when I do make a hat, I know I don't have to like stop and mark my loom. Alright, number 7, project bags. Now I recently just got a project bag ordered it from Ella at No Catchy Named Bags at on Etsy, and that's my first official project bag. Before that, my project bags were Walmart and Dollar Tree reusable bags, shopping bags or whatever. Those are great for project bags. That's what I've always used. And you can, you know, put all your yarn you're using for that project in there, your loom in there, and your index card that tells all about your project so you don't forget any of your information. And if you have extra, like a notions pouch, you can put your extra hook, extra pair of scissors, extra needle, and just keep it in that bag so that you can grab it on the go when you're headed out the door. Another thing that I use, because I have to, you may not have this issue, and be glad if you don't, but I have very bad vision, and plus, you know, I'm missing a lot of fingers, so I need all the help I can get. But I cannot get yarn through that. I can't do it. So I get my yarn, and I hold it like this, and then I put my needle in front of it. And at the Dollar Tree, they sell a bag of these with at least 50 in it. These are dental picks. And, of course, they're unused dental picks that I use. I don't use them. I buy some for the bathroom, and then I just get a few out and put with my project stuff. So I just take this through here and hook my yarn and pull it through. And that I just cannot thread a yarn without it. So I always keep several of these in my notions bags. So if that helps somebody, I'm glad for that. Okay, also project baskets. At Dollar Tree, they have these baskets right here. It's kind of a squarish, but maybe a little bit rectangle instead of square. And when I'm working on a project here, I'll get all my yarns that I'm going to need for that project and put them in this basket. And so I'll know that I was just working on a square that I was doing for a blanket, and the square was rainbow. So I put all my yarn that I was going to use for this. And now I just finished that square up like today. So now I'll empty this basket and put all these yarns back on the shelf. And, you know, load it up for another project. Okay, another thing that I'd like to share is if you need to use 2 strands of yarn, this is what I do. Let me get this yarn out here. Okay, so I have 1 strand coming from the inside and 1 strand coming from the outside. Instead of, like, I don't know how I would unravel yarn and cut it for a ball and then have another ball. I don't know how I would know that I had enough yarn to do that project with. So I like to use just both my strands coming from the same yarn. 1 from the inside and 1 coming from the outside. And so as I'm working, it just pulls down. So that was something that it intimidated me when a project said to use 2 strands when I first started, because I knew I was going to make a mess tangling up that yarn. So that's the best way I figured out to do that. Okay, so oh, another thing is progress keeper, and I have these in a little Valentine heart. I ate the chocolate and cleaned it out and put my stitch markers or progress keepers in there. So for if I'm working on a project and I'm finished with it for that day and I'm not going to work on it anymore that evening, or probably not the next couple of days, I'll stick a stitch marker on there. And this is the one with the lobster clasp. I'll hook that on there wherever I stop at, and so then when I get back to my project, I just work and work and work and work, and then I can look to see how much work I did that day. Like, I can look at my stitch marker and then see how much I made progress on, and then I might stick another stitch marker on there different, just to so that I can see, like, okay, that's where I finished on day 1. This is where I finished the next week when I picked it back up. And I might just do that a couple of times. Or I might just eventually start moving the stitch markers up. So it just helps me kind of keep up with how much progress I'm making, and if I need to up my progress or something like that. So, I think that was a couple more than 10, but I'm still going to call this the 10 loom knit tips. And I thank Jane for tagging me, and I hope that some of the tips that I have or that Jane had helps you. And I want to tag Kristy at Looming Crafty Fiber Arts. So Kristy, you have been tagged. All right, thanks for stopping by, and I hope this was helpful to someone. Let me know, and I will talk to you soon.